Welcome to My Business Matters, the Michigan Chamber podcast.
Welcome to My Business Matters, the podcast of the Michigan Chamber of Commerce. This is where we have meaningful conversations on the issues shaping our state's future. I'm Jim Holcomb, President and CEO of the Michigan Chamber. And today, we're going to talk about housing. Housing is a quality of life issue. It's also an economic one. Across Michigan, employers are struggling to attract and retain talent, and families are struggling to find homes they can afford. Helping to unpack us all today is Brad Ward with the Michigan Realtors, Don Crandal with the Home Builders Association of Michigan, and Randy Gross, our very own Michigan Chamber staffer. He's the lead on our issue for us. Everyone, welcome to the microphone.
Thanks for having us.
Appreciate you coming in. Certainly an issue that's front and center in everybody's mind, as well as the media housing. It seems like something that a lot of people talk about, but we've never really figured out how to fix or how to make a dent. So that's where you all come in, because I know you guys have all the answers, so that'll be good. But we do hear a lot about it, but let's start with, what does it actually mean? What's it look like on the ground for employers, families, workers, that we have a housing shortage? Dawn, I'll start with you.
Thanks. We do have a housing shortage, and it impacts everything from our population to our aging population to attaining new population and new growth. We are not building what we need to build to just stay steady. So the last time we did a really big build in the state was in 2005, and 54,000 permits were pulled. 2007, that number dropped to 15,000. 2009, that number dropped to 6,900. Last year, we pulled 15,821, and this is the first year since 2005 that our prediction is actually lower than the previous year, and we're forecasting 15,376.
Was there anything special about 2005? Was anything happening, or was it just an environment that just all came together?
It was just an environment that all came together. But still, when you look at the average age of a home in our state, it's 50 years old. So even our last big build, those homes are coming up on 21, 22 years old. We need new housing stock.
Yeah, and I would point out, too, this isn't unique to Michigan. I mean, this is happening nationwide. Just we as a country have underbuilt for the last decade or so, and not met the market kind of where it is. And from our realtor members' perspectives, we talk about pocketbook issues. Housing is a pocketbook issue. So, housing costs are up, mortgage costs are up, rent costs are up. It's competitive. You have multiple offers. We're still very much a seller's market. There isn't enough inventory on the market to meet the demand. I mean, the median home price in Michigan has gone up $70,000 in the last 3 years. And on top of that, we have what we would consider like a normal market is about 6 months of inventory, is a balanced market where you have supply to meet demand. This state has hovered kind of between 2.5 months of inventory, 3 months of inventory for the last handful of years. So we really don't have the inventory that's trying to kind of meet the market. So that really is kind of what it looks like to our members.
How much of the inventory issue is driven by the fact that we had such low interest rates for a while? People got locked into homes that were right at the height of their affordability, but with the low interest rates, it made it workable, that now, even if they can sell it for more, they can't get into something and make it an economically viable proposition.
Yeah, it's a great question, and that definitely has.
Thank you. I thought it was too.
That definitely has something to do with it. You hear about the lock-in effect of the mortgage interest rate. In Michigan, we kind of have like a double, almost triple lock-in effect, because not only do you have the mortgage interest rates that have increased over the last few years here, but we also have Proposal A. So we have this property tax cap. So if you've lived in your home, 2020 or before, just in those last 5 years, like I said, $70,000 in 3 years, your uncapping of property taxes, even if you wanted to go from a large family home because now you're an empty nester and you wanted to downsize, you could be faced with a property tax bill that may be double what you're paying now. So you got higher interest rate, higher property taxes, and then in Michigan, we still have a real estate transfer tax. And so, you kind of got these three economic mental hurdles that you have to go out to get over if you want to sell.
Now, how much of this, for any of you to chime in, how much of this is not having the skilled trades to do the building? That do we have the workforce that can actually tee up if all the capital was there and the money was there and, hey, let's go, we've got permits. Dawn, you referenced numbers earlier about the permits.
Yeah.
is there the builders to fulfill all those permits?
No. So when we look at the housing, we look at supply and demand. So to Brad's point, we don't have the inventory, we don't have the supply to meet the demand. The same is true when you look at the labor in the state. So these are last year's numbers. We just received this year's numbers, but I don't have them with me. The median age of a builder in the state is 58.
Oh.
So go back to the average age of a home being 50, average age of a building being 58. When you look at that, roughly there's about 50,000 plus licensees in the state. 24,000 of them fall in the 56 plus range. And when you look at the 18 to 34 year range, you're only at about 2,500. So for those going out, maybe 4, you've got 1 coming in. And so that's why we, work really hard to get young kids and get veterans and returning citizens into the trades, because AI is not going to replace a builder.
Yeah. And they're good jobs, they're good paying jobs, they're stable.
Jobs.
There's obviously a market for it.
Yes.
Yeah. Randy, how much of this housing shortage is impacting members of the Michigan Chamber and other groups, just the general business community?
Yeah, it's had a pretty big impact on a number of members I've talked to. There's several circumstances where we've seen where somebody has come in, they have a new facility, they've expanded or located in Michigan, and they're trying to find a workforce, and they can't find housing within 45 minutes to an hour that is, affordable and within the, middle class housing costs, we'll call it, right? I mean, Brad kind of hit on this a little bit, a $70,000 increase over the last 3 years. I mean, that's just not an attainable number to match. So, we're not raising wages, at the same clip that the cost of housing is going up. We can't do that. So to attract, a workforce into an area, without housing is almost impossible. Some members are busing people in from across the state. They're chartering buses to bring people an hour and a half away, because that's the best solution they have, because they're unable to build right now.
Yeah, and then, the commuting problem, the cost of gas, and I think it transitions into other issues. Daycare. It's hard to be traveling 45 minutes to an hour back and forth to your job if your daycare's in one part of the state and you're working in another.
That's probably a different show, but yes, daycare is a big issue for our members as well.
Yeah. Brad, when your members, when they're talking to clients, are people changing their preferences on what they're looking for, and does that impact what gets built, or is there a chicken and egg there?
The realtor's number one job right now is manage expectations. So you're managing expectations for a buyer, saying, look, you are going to be competing against multiple people. And so there are expectations that you have to know going into that. We've seen situations where people are willing to waive things like inspections, waive appraisals. They're willing to make offers that I will pay, X number of dollars over appraised value if it doesn't come in. So it's getting very competitive. And, when we talk about some of that downsizing, a lot of it is, people who have cash versus first-time home buyers. So it's really about managing those expectations. But I think in terms of the stuff that's being built, that is where we really do have to meet the market. The one thing that always kind of comes up, people say, well, Michigan's population is relatively stagnant. It really hasn't changed in the last several years. Why do we have a housing crisis? Well, you don't count homes based on the number of people. You count homes based on households. People are living longer, divorce is higher, people are living separately, differently, and we have an aging housing stock, and some of that gets aged out. So we do have to continue to build, and there is changing demand in the market. So, a lot of multi-generational. So if you look at accessory dwelling units, so in-law suites, those are things people, where you have 2 generations living under one roof. Those are things that I think help the housing situation, but aren't allowed in a lot of our local communities. People are looking for walkable. People are looking to age in place. People are looking for, locations near transit or their job. So we also have to be, cognizant of what the market is looking for too. That's a good point.
And I would add on that for prospective employers who are looking to come to Michigan, right? They know their workforce are going to be looking for the things Brad is pointing out there. Walkable communities, access to mass transit, stuff like that. Things where historically maybe we haven't focused on as much housing stock because that wasn't the demand 20 years ago, 30 years ago when we were building, 50 years ago when we were building. It was a different demand by the employees at that time in the workforce. And that change in the workforce and what they're looking for in their housing needs to be met if we want to continue to attract, large employers or high wage jobs or different sectors. I mean, it kind of goes with that piece of it.
Yeah, it's certainly an issue when I talk to business leaders across state, an issue in their economic development plans. Am I going to expand here? Am I going to move here? How am I going to satisfy my employees? Because that's a huge component of their success, is making sure that they can get the right talent. We've kind of talked a little bit about some of the negative impacts. What's driving the negative impact? Like we talked a little bit, there's a shortage of maybe skilled trades, but Dawn, you said there, you gave the permitting requests. How are locals engaged in this this debate?
Oh, they're engaged.
I would assume everybody has the same goal. We want a thriving Michigan.
Yes,
we
but
want.
I
we
think
want to be able to do
also
it.
back to Brad's point about households. I don't. And we were talking earlier before we started about, a group who said Michigan's not a growing population. Mm-hmm. I think at that point, it's not Michigan competing necessarily with people from Ohio that are going to come here. It's Grand Rapids competing with Traverse City, or Traverse City competing with Southeast Michigan. Mm-hmm. And those communities that are on the forefront of being kind of creative in their zoning and allowing for housing and the types of housing that Brad mentioned, those are the communities that are going to win when you start looking at aging population, right? Like as people start aging in one community, that may not be where they necessarily want to retire. They may want to move up north. Yep. Well, then you run into the NIMBYs, right? Not in my backyard. We don't want all those people from downstate to move up to our quiet little country area. And so you've got the blend of, where people choose to live and want to live versus people who are making the decision saying, we don't want that kind of housing in our community. Mm-hmm.
It seems like we do have that debate on many issues, not just housing, but, and I'm not sure what the right balance is. We all, I think, around this table think about less government is better government. And letting people locally decide their character and community, but also making sure that you're utilizing state resources and we're all in this together. We want to make sure that there's a place for people.
Yeah, you mentioned, we talked about the labor shortage adding to these challenges. Well, in building homes, there's the labor shortage, you got material costs, supply chain, tariffs, interest rates, as you brought up. The one thing that the state and local government does have is that rules and regulations, the permitting, the zoning, all of those things that kind of can add cost to housing. So we as a state, we as local governments may not be able to change tariffs or get involved in global supply chain and we can't build workers or train workers overnight, but we can dig in there and look at the rules and regulations that we set up as obstacles to creating new housing or obstacles that add to the cost of housing. Mm-hmm.
How do we change those? Is this an issue for the legislature? Is that everything done locally? Do you have to empower locals? Randy, how do you see the policy playing out?
I think it's a combination of all the above. I mean, I definitely think there's stuff we can handle at the state level. I'll look at the tax rate for a little bit and kind of focus on that. We've talked about, kind of being trapped in there. There's been proposals about eliminating the state transfer tax. There's been proposals about capping the pop-up tax in certain circumstances, maybe incentivizing, older generations who are looking to downsize to provide some protections for them, to open up some stock, to, the state could make some policy efforts in those positive steps in that direction to open up some stock that would relieve some of that pressure, maybe, but they got to have a place to go. So the other side of that is you got to open it up, and there has to be some new stock on the market and new builds going on that are smaller. They don't need a 2,500 square foot house. I want a 1,000 square foot duplex or something that's more manageable for two people or whatever the case may be. So I do think it starts at the legislature. I think there are definitely things locals could do to ease this, working with their builders in their communities to go down that path. But I do. It's a combination of all the above, I believe.
With the local issue, do you think it's a situation of educating people, or are there just hard, long, dry lines in the sand been drawn that we want this, we don't want that?
I think there's definitely a role for education. You brought up the NIMBY issue. And a lot of times that is people don't like to talk about change in their communities. And a lot of times they don't understand what that change looks like. So, there's a bill that's currently before the legislature that would allow duplexes in single family residential zones. When you look at those homes, they look just like the home next door to it, but they have 2 front doors. Instead of 1. So, there is an education process that change isn't always scary. This isn't the end of your community. This isn't ruining the rural character or whatever you want to call it of your community. But so there is an education process. I think there's a role for local governments to play in terms of looking at their own rules. And there's a role definitely for the state to play. The state has permitting that is often involved in these. They have building codes, states reviewing those. But the state also, gives local governments the power to zone. We have a statewide zoning enabling act, and the state, like other states, both red and blue, is starting to look at, how can we make changes at the state level that will help get more shovels in the ground. That'll help maybe combat some of this NIMBY attitude. That'll help local governments kind of turn a mirror on themselves a little bit to figure out, how can we be more responsive to the needs of people in our community that are looking to move to our community. So I think there's definitely a role for both the state and local to play in this. Yes.
I think the one thing to remember is, builders are going to build what their customer or client wants or what the market bears, right? Builders aren't going to just start going out and building duplexes if there isn't a need or a request for them, because it's not financially smart on a builder side to do that. And so a lot of the things, and I've heard it as I've talked to legislators and local elected officials, they do tend to go to that worst case scenario, right? Like, if this goes through, this is going to happen in my community. And builders are truly going to build what the market bears and what their client and their customer wants.
Is housing a partisan or a political issue? Everybody seems to have like their own perspective, but does it break down on partisan lines, or is it more about where you're from or your community than it is a R or D?
I was going to say it's a political issue, but not necessarily a partisan issue. So I
think that's a pretty good answer.
It's a very political issue, but it's not partisan. I think it's very geographically based. It's your community based. I think, I grew up in Southwest Michigan. Our view on housing was substantially, I remember moving up in the Lansing area, and the first time I saw the cost of houses up, I'm like, wait a minute, that's not what housing costs. What's wrong with you people? So, I think it is political, but I don't think it's partisan.
Yeah, I mean, partisan in a sense that, I think we all recognize housing is important. We want people to get into housing. From our association's perspective, owning a home, that's the American dream. Yep. The different parties may have different ideas on how to get there, but I don't think it's partisan at all when you really get down to it in terms of the goal of opening up more housing opportunities, lowering the cost of housing for Michiganders. I think that is a shared goal of both parties. It gets political, I think, now with the NIMBY attitudes when you start talking about these things at the state level, and all of a sudden you go to your local township meeting and everyone is furious because it's like this is a local control issue, and I want to find someone to run against you.
How much does different generational perspectives impact housing? I know I've read a lot lately that younger people, they really don't, like you said, Brad, the American dream is to own a home and raise your family, that they're more, hey, I'm changing jobs about every 7 years and I like a different location and I want to be more flexible and I really don't want to own because then I'm trapped and I get locked in. Are we seeing that play out in the market at all? And does that, Dawn, follow-up to you would be, does that, again, impact what is built? So, Brad, I'll let you get the first part.
It's a great question, and I don't know that I have the answer, but rental is attractive, and a lot of times it's attractive because it's a lower cost option than owning. And so I don't know how much of that is driven by the youth wanting to not necessarily put down roots somewhere and be able to kind of be flexible, or how much of it is driven by, well, that's where the market's leading me to go because I can't get into a home of my own. But we need housing of all types. We need rental, we need multifamily, we need single family, we need tiny houses, we need
something for everyone.
Yeah, everyone has kind of their own opinion of how and where they want to live. You talk about generational. We had, there was a time when small houses and density was the way you built.
Yeah.
We have a generation of folks who grew up in 1,000 square foot, bungalows.
Yeah.
And, there may have been 6 people in there out of 3 bedrooms. So,
your neighbors where you open the window and you can shake hands.
Yeah, exactly. and now we have, people watch $1 Million Listing and HGTV and the, everyone wants a, larger home or no home at all. They want to be, in a cool apartment downtown. So we need something for everybody.
And I think to that point, even as I drive around Lansing, I'm seeing homes that are being built to rent. Like I'm seeing communities where, they are houses, but they're not for sale. They are for rent. And there's a couple of them around here. And going back to, your neighbor used to be, that was social media back in our day, right?
Exactly. Exactly. What's being proposed like on the policy front, and what do you think would actually move the needle? And we'll just go left to right. So Randy, I'll start with you a little bit.
Oh, well, I know there's several packages or several bills out there packaged aimed at trying to centralize some aspects of zoning. I would say, standardize maybe is a better approach.
Uniformity
across the state on some zoning pieces. Dealing with various things as far as allowing duplexes or requirements if there's established infrastructure, sewer and water to an area, and you're going to build in that area, like setting some standards across the state as this is what you can and can't require. I think there's interest there. I think that'll continue to be discussed. I don't have a crystal ball out on that one yet, but there's a lot of bipartisan interest and a lot of groups on both sides, non-traditional bedfellows that are really looking at this, because I think, to Brad's point, people are recognizing this, like getting housing is an important piece. So I that's kind of what I see out there. Dawn, I don't know.
Yeah, but we're seeing the same thing, right? And it wouldn't be the first time for standardized codes or anything across the state, right? Like we have a statewide building code that is standard for everybody. So, when this, housing zoning reform package came out, I would hear from legislators, I've got, 16 municipalities and 14 of them are calling and they're angry at me. And I said, but now think about a builder that has to build to, like if they're in 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 different communities,
patchwork is hard.
They're building to, 10 different zoning codes and regulations depending on where they are. So, our builders are looking for guardrails and continuity and stability in the market that makes it easier, because every time you add a layer or a regulation that increases the cost of housing even by $1,000, and we just got these numbers from National, we're kicking out over like 5,000 individuals that cannot get into the market.
Do we know how much regulation adds to the cost of a build?
So our National has done a study. It's an old number. They're coming out with new numbers this fall, but it's about $94,000. So it's not just zoning. I need to be very clear on this because I've been challenged. But it is like the cost of studies, the land that's given back to the government, setbacks. Sure. It is labor. It is materials. It's all the things before you even put a shovel in the ground.
That's a huge number, though.
But it is a huge number. And the thing that people don't understand is I was talking to one of my builders on the west side. He had a plan that was already approved, 140 units. And he already approved. He'd gone in to do like one piece of final paperwork, and the township official said, I need you to do a traffic study. It was a county road, not a township road. That delayed the project enough that only 40 of those units are going to be built this year, and 100 of them will be built next year. And because builders have carrying costs, it's adding another $5,000 to $6,000 per unit per year, all because they wanted to be able to say, I had them do a traffic study so that when those NIMBYs came at the elected official, they had something to waive.
So frustrating.
Brad, I know you're going to talk on this too, but just one thing on the zoning piece. I do think there's probably worth some clarification. This isn't about your character and stuff in the community. They're talking about like some broad-based changes as far as the zoning like uniformity piece.
Yeah, I wish we could say that there was one policy that could pass and all of a sudden we're going to have housing available to us. But it's really about putting tools in the toolbox. It's trying to address pieces of this to get costs to move, to get more homes built. It's interesting as we've kind of looked at these things over the last few years, these zoning changes that are being proposed at the state legislative level. So lot sizes, development studies, parking minimums, duplexes, ADUs, dwelling size, like all of those things, they are identified time and time again by local governments, by state governments, by the federal government as being impediments to housing supply and increasing costs. So, I mean, you don't read about things passing the United States House of Representatives with only 9 no votes, but we had a housing bill that went through the U.S. House of Representatives that included these changes in directing federal dollars and federal programs to communities and states that make these zoning changes. And so not a partisan issue. I mean,
what happened in the Senate?
Over in the Senate, they amended it, and the Senate passed it. It is now, they've mashed the titles together. It's called the 21st Century Road to Housing Act. So they took the Senate piece, the House piece, and meshed them together. So they sent it back over to the House, and the House hasn't brought it back up as of yet. But again, a recognition that these zoning pieces are, again, they're included in the Michigan Municipal League's My Home Loan program that they've rolled out. Theirs is a little bit more menu-based and incentivized. They're in this housing readiness package. They're identified in the Michigan Association of Planning's zoning reform toolkit. So, I mean, there's agreement that these policies are harmful to housing. And so it's just getting people together to coalesce around, like, stop paying people to build. Stop subsidizing this. Just get out of their way and let Michiganders have homes.
Let the market decide and go forward. We're kind of coming to the end here. I want to go around the horn, give you an option. Either you have something you want to point to that we haven't talked about, you want to make a point, or if you can articulate, if Michigan gets this right over the next couple of years, what does success look like? Randy, we'll start with you.
Yeah. For me, success looks like, getting maybe back to the early 2000s numbers as far as number of homes built, or at least a trend that's showing that way over the next 5 years. We're seeing an upgrowth in new construction, and we can go to businesses that are looking to come to Michigan and say, hey, look, you want to come here because look at these are the type of housing and environments and communities that your employees are going to want to be part of.
I think it puts us on the track to grow our state population-wise. It puts us in that place to say we're open for business, right? To Brandy's point, businesses are going to look if the housing's here. I always say housing is economic development. You can't have one without the other. And so as we start looking at being able to put some good housing policies in place and labor for housing in place, it sets the stage for conversations. The next governor, and we're going to have a new governor come January 1, there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of policy decisions that are going to take place.
Yeah, I think a normalization in the market, providing people with opportunities to get into homes, providing opportunities for families to own, to rent, and to have some assurance that cost is something that they're going to be able to afford, I think is what success looks like from our perspective.
Well, I think listening to all of you today, it's clear that housing touches everything: jobs, economic growth, community stability, opportunity. And as you've all talked about today, solving this challenge, it's not about one policy or one group. It's going to take alignment across all industries and communities. So thank you again to Brad Ward. He's Vice President of Public Policy Legal Affairs at the Michigan Realtors. Dawn Crandal is the Executive Vice President for Government Relations with the Home Builders Association of Michigan. Randy Gross is the Senior Director of Legislative Affairs and Associate General Counsel at the Michigan Chamber. At the Michigan Chamber, we're going to continue to follow this issue closely, hopefully working to move forward with practical policy solutions. So make sure to stay tuned, and thanks for joining us today on My Business Matters.